How many hours in a Sabbath day from the Creator's perspective? Perhaps it's not what you think. So, I think there are at least two main schools of thought on this that you may have heard. Of course, the obvious one is 24 hours. And then you may have heard a school of thought where some people are saying it should be 12 hours. And it becomes important to what I'm going to explain in this video. It has to do with the Creator's international dateline. Well, no, it doesn't, but it might help you to understand what's going on and the significance of this, because when you live near the international dateline out in the Pacific Ocean, if you can go online and look at some of these discussions that are happening, but people are really confused about which day they should be celebrating the seventh-day Sabbath, or I guess any Sabbath, but let's just look at the seventh-day Sabbath, because the international dateline out there in the Pacific Ocean, if you've seen it, squiggly line, it makes the Gregorian calendar date and subsequently the weekday shift one day because of the placement of that line. So some people who live around that line are on either side of the line are seeing the same sunrise, and yet it is a different date for them because of the placement of the Gregorian international dateline and the way that the Gregorian dates transition at that man-appointed line. So anyway, how long is the Sabbath day from the Creator's perspective? Just try and answer this before I do, and look down at the earth, flat or round, whatever, and imagine yourself, you are the Creator, or a bird's eye view of the earth. How many hours have to pass from your vantage point for everyone on earth to be able to experience their full Sabbath day cycle? Okay, so let's take a person in the United States, and for the sake of this illustration, I'm going to say, let's imagine the days are beginning at sunrise, and it's been on my to-do list for a long time to come out with a video on that. I'm going to say, that's definitely a whole nother video, but just food for thought. The evening to evening, days starting at evening to evening, I do believe you can discover that's kind of a Babylonian transition tradition that came, icy roads here, while they were in Babylonian captivity, similar to like the lunar month thing. But in addition, so it's a big traditional thing, evening to evening. But when you step back and you look at it, when we came into truth, it might have been so easy to jump into that boat of tradition. But if you start to think about it, and this has been on my heart and mind and spirit for years, and like I said, it's been on my to-do list to make a video about it, but I have been thinking about it and studying it on and off for years now, and this is just where I'm currently at. Of course, I'm open to more discussion if people have other points to consider. Whoa, ice, snow, scary. But when you look at the evening to evening doctrine, it really only stands on two main pillars. And that's the verse in Leviticus 23 that says, from evening to evening so you celebrate your Sabbath, which was a special Sabbath. It didn't say that ye shall celebrate all your Sabbaths. It was specifically talking about the Sabbath associated with the Day of Atonement, I believe. So we really shouldn't be adding to or taking away from the scriptures. Like, it was very specific, and it did not say all Sabbaths. And the other pillar is the Genesis creation account, where it says, and there was evening and there was morning and the first day, or whatever. And so really, when you step back and you look at the evening to evening doctrine, it really only stands on those two pillars. And like I already described the Leviticus one, I mean, we don't want to be adding to or taking away from Scripture, so that kind of just makes that one fall apart. And then the creation account, really, it's quite simply just, I think it's a sequence of events. It's like, yeah, there was morning, and there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. So, like, it described a sequence of events. Like, he was creating, and then there was evening, and then there was morning, and that was the end of the day. So it could, I mean, it definitely could just be describing just the sequence of events. Like, he created, he had dinner, there was evening, and then there was morning, and when morning came, that was the end of the first day. Like, so I think that, and then you can get into this thing, and I spent some time doing this too, where you just begin to look at all the verses, and you're trying to look for verses that kind of explain this, like telling stories like, if you don't save yourself this night, tomorrow you will be killed, and so, but and I found you can really read a lot of those verses both ways, and it kind of got a little frustrating. But this was not supposed to be a morning to evening video, but since I'm talking about it, might as well talk about it a little more. So you can really almost drive yourself insane looking at those kinds of verses. But there are a couple verses that I started to zero in on, and I recommend you look for and study out. It kind of narrows down the playing field a little bit. But look for the transitional words. Look for the verses that have the transitional words, like tomorrow and yesterday, or yesternight is a big one. Like, and there's the story of Lot's daughters, and you read that account, look for the verse that has yesternight, and it's just clear, like, it was yesternight. It wasn't associated with that new day. It was yesternight, and then tomorrow. So yesternight and tomorrow. I recommend looking at those. And one more thought on that. The Creator's times, they start in the spring. And so if you imagine the year cycle as a big version of the day cycle, winter would be the dead of the night. It would be the night season. Summer would be the middle of the day, the heat of the day, and then spring and fall are the transition parts of the day, so like morning and evening. And so, if the year ends with the season of winter, and doesn't it make sense that the day would end with the season of night and then start in the spring, and thy mercies are new every morning. So I will be coming out with a video on this topic soon, but I just wanted to touch on that rabbit trail there. But anyway, back to the duration of a Sabbath day. I'm going to give these examples looking at the day starting in the morning. So let's just say you live in the United States, and the sun rises, and the Sabbath day is beginning for you. And let us just say it is my current understanding that the Sabbath day is 24 hours long. Maybe for your location. Maybe I'll have to get into a more specific video that talks about why it's not just 12. But I do think it's even the Genesis account itself kind of establishes that, like, it included the night and it said that was the first day. So I mean, and like, think about the Creator resting on the seventh day, like, it was a full cycle there. So but that's another topic for another time. But so assuming the day for your location is 24 hours, the sun rises, United States, and you have 24 hours for your Sabbath. So, the sun's gonna do its cycle for 24 hours. But now, imagine there's somebody else maybe I should have said Israel. Maybe that'd be easier. Let's start with someone in Israel. So the sun rises in Israel, because this might be easier for you to understand with the international date line. That might be harder for some people to get. So let's start closer to the international date line. So let's say Israel. Someone is in Israel. Sun rises, and they get 24 hours to experience their Sabbath day. But is that how long the Creator spends with His people on earth every week to enjoy their Sabbaths? From a bird's eye view of the earth, let's now jump from Israel to somebody living in the United States. So Israel's sunrise was like, 10 or 12 hours before the United States. So the United States people are still asleep, and their Sabbath sunrise has not begun yet. They're waiting for another 10 hours, and then finally the sun rises, and they get their Sabbath day morning, and then they need 24 hours. So do you see what's happening? The clock of the Sabbath day has already begun ticking as soon as people in Israel started their Sabbath day. Like, people in Israel are, it's Holy Convocation. It's a day of remembrance. It's a day of, remember this day. It's a day of holiness, Kodeshness, and they're fellowshipping with the Creator. It's a divine appointment day. It's a special day to the Creator and a special day to fellowship with your brothers, but the Creator as well. So the Creator is fellowshipping with His people who are looking up to Him, and He is looking down to them. And in Israel, that began like 10-ish hours before the people in the United States even woke up. So for 10 hours already, the Sabbath from the Creator's vantage point, or from, bird's eye view, has been already in progress. And so if we now say the United States has begun their Sabbath, well, their Sabbath day is going to last 24 hours now. Like, that's a full Sabbath day cycle for them. So already now, for that cycle to complete, when that 24-hour cycle completes, it's going to wrap all the way around, it's going to pass Israel and come back to the United States, and then the United States person will have the end of their Sabbath day. But do you see what happened there? There's an overlap, and it was 24 hours for the person in the United States, but in addition, Israel had already started 10 hours before, or whatever it is. So already the Creator is spending Sabbath day time with His creation for a period of 34 hours already. And so this example can get more extreme as you continue to progress across the map or around the map or whatever. You go to someone in Alaska who's, right on the edge of that international date line. But if you forget about the international date line and just it can get confusing. I'm going to have a separate video talking about the Creator's international date line and how it moves, but just to try and help people's understanding. The most extreme situation is you take the Sabbath day cycle and you say it began for someone in Israel. So the most extreme example or illustration of this point is to then, you looked at a person in the United States, say on the eastern shore, and then you look at someone on the western shore, and then you look at someone at Alaska, and it keeps pushing this window of time over and over and over and over, because it's going to overlap farther and farther and farther. The most extreme situation is someone who lives, just a little east of Israel, who didn't see that sunrise when Israel did. And so what I'm trying to say is, at the end of it, the Creator on a weekly basis seems to be spending more than 24 hours with His creation. Like, as everyone on earth gets their opportunity to have Sabbath and fellowship with Him, and it's a different perspective from His eyes, and there's an overlap of time, and He's not just Sabbathing with His people for 24 hours, from his perspective, he, in the most extreme situation, is Sabbathing with his people for at least somewhere around 48 hours a week. If you look at the map and you imagine, again, that most extreme situation where you started with someone in Israel, but then you got to look at someone in the United States, they're 10 hours later, then you look at someone on the western coast of the United States, that's another 3 hours later, look at Alaska, and you keep going, and there's this overlap of time. And so the Creator is actually every week spending 48 hours or more, and there could be a little more or a little less maybe, but I mean there's certainly more than 24. And so that's an interesting thing to wrap your mind around from the perspective of the Creator, but it is also an important thing for you to wrap your mind around with respect to the Creator's times, and this thing I've been calling the duration of a sign day. And those people who are trying to find extra days or less days to make different calendar counts work out, you know who you are. But this, I think, has a lot to do with that. And I'm gonna go ahead and say it. I'm very open-minded, but so I do currently look at Enoch, and I think the book of Enoch, the luminary section at least, has important information about the movements of the heavenly luminaries. And I mean, if it's wrong, it's wrong. Fine, we'll move on. But so far, I think there's potential for what it's describing to still be true. And so I'm in the process of still testing that book out. But you have to realize in Enoch, it talks about, the big discrepancy is, Enoch says 364, and we clearly live in a year that's 365.25-ish days. So, I mean, clearly Enoch is false. But I think we might be missing something. And it has a lot to do with what I just described, the duration of the sign day or the Sabbath day, because there's an overlap of time. And if you look even at the Gregorian calendar and the way that time functions now, there is always an overlap of time. There are always two Gregorian dates running at the same time, depending on which side of that international date line you live on. There's always two Gregorian dates running simultaneously, and there's this overlap of time, and the seeming discrepancy between Enoch and what we seem to have, the 364 versus 365, is about 1 day and a little more. But what I just described is easily making up the difference of 1 day. And like I said, if you plot it out on paper, it just might have the potential to, because people, it just might have the potential to make up the gap there, the difference. And so it's just interesting. Think about it from the eyes of the Creator, and it's not the eyes of men. And Enoch talks about how there's an overlap. The luminaries are rendering service. He says there are 364 positions the sun takes between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, the tropical year, the seasonal year. He says there are 34 stations, and so there are 364 positions, and he says on the seasonal days that the luminaries render extra service on these days. And if you think about the duration of a sign day and how much time needs to pass for people to be able to look up at the sun and the moon in the sky all around the earth, this is a slightly different thing, but it's related, because each of these sign days, if they each have a little bit of extra service, and Enoch says that, then you could get 4 days that are, say, 1.3-ish. They have a little bit of extra service. Whoa. sliding here on the snowy road. I gotta love these West Virginia country roads and the slushy snow and bald tires. But anyway, what was I saying? The Book of Enoch says there are these days that render extra service, and so if you had 4 of them that were rendering extra service, that was 1.3 days each. Then if you had 3 days that were 365, and then you had these 4 extra days that are like 1.3, they're rendering extra service, that gets you to the 365. But it is kind of, it's definitely 364 stations. And I wonder, there's some translational verification work that I'm still working on to make sure, because Enoch at one point definitely says 364 stations. I wonder if the other points, slipping again, maybe it should have been 364 stations as well, not 364 days. But, it is technically 364 days. It's just that there are 4 days out of the 364 that are kind of special, and they have more time. But to wrap this up, and again, kind of thinking about like the duration of a sign day and the duration of a Sabbath day from the Creator's perspective, think about the duration of a sign day. And if we're looking at sundials or trying to see signs from the luminaries above the horizon, then again, think about the situation of someone in Israel starting now. Now, their sign day, the duration of the sign day that they're looking for, they're not going to see a sundial sign until the sun clears the horizon. So, there is a period of time, and sometimes, it's a substantial amount of time where you have daylight, but the sun has not yet crossed the horizon. So you're not getting a shadow yet. You're not getting a sundial or a sign yet. So for like maybe a couple hours before, like right around dusk and dawn. So it's the same illustration that we went through for the duration of the Sabbath day, except now we're looking at the duration of a sign day. And that's a little different because, again, it's the sun is going to be in the sky for a couple hours. You're going to have sunlight for a couple hours longer, but you're only going to get the duration of the sign day for, as soon as the sun clears the horizon. So, in addition to that, by the time you work your way around to the last person who's waiting for the day to begin as you progress through time and, across the map or around the earth or whatever it is, that last person who's waiting, who's at the end of the time trail is, for the duration of a sign day, we are not waiting for we're only waiting for the sun to set. We're not waiting for the rest of that 24 hours to complete itself for that person at the end of the time trail. Like the first example we were talking about is 24-hour Sabbath day. So yeah, that the Creator would be around to fellowship maybe with His creation for that extra 12 hours of night for that person at the end who was working out their Sabbath day cycle maybe. But for the sign day, it doesn't include that 12 hours of night at the end. It only includes to the end of sunrise and sunset, when the sun is above the horizon or the moon is above the horizon, and it's able to create these luminary signs. And so it's a little shorter than the 48-hour period I described earlier. It's actually it's actually maybe somewhere right around 1.3 days, I think, is if you have to look at this, the amount of time that the sun is above the horizon for everyone on Earth from different vantage points, and I think it is somewhere right around the 1.3 days. So it almost has the potential to make perfect, consistent sense with what Enoch is describing. And again, like I said, I'm very open-minded. If it doesn't work out, that's fine. We'll keep seeking. But as far as I can see, Enoch is the only book that actually talks about these cycles of the heavenly luminaries. And I mean, we can prove that out. If it's true, great. If it's not, okay, let's move on. But I mean, there are things that it does talk about that are easily proven. Like, I remember the first time I read it, Enoch was saying things like, the sun and the moon are the same size, like perspective. And when you think about it, yeah, they are the same size. Look, they're about the same circumference from our vantage point. In addition, Enoch says, like, the sun is 7 times brighter than the moon. And I don't know how they would figure that out back in the day, but I mean, I remember the first time I read that, I was like, well, let's see if that's true. And I Googled it, and sure enough, like, modern science is saying, yeah, the sun is about 7 times brighter than the moon. And so, I mean, it's a process of proving things out. I mean, and I came upon Enoch, and I wanted to test it out. Again, the luminary section. I don't know about all the other sections of Enoch, but I'm still definitely think there's potential for the luminary section. I'm testing it out. But, it's just a process, truth-seeking process. And there are translational things, and then also sundial accuracy type things, and it's just a process. But I think there's still potential for it to work, pending more accurate translation and more accurate luminary measurements. But this is a big piece of the puzzle, I think, and I don't think people see this: the duration of the Sabbath day from the Creator's perspective, and then the duration of a sign day, like how much time has to pass in order for people to see the luminary signs rendered from the sun and the moon when they are above the horizon. I think that's about a 30-ish hour period of time where the sun is above, because it's only right at the beginning. So if Israel was the beginning point, then the sun is going to be a little bit east of Israel when you can see it in the heavens. And then likewise for someone at the end of that, the sun's going to be a little bit west of them, and when they're looking for the signs at the end of this time trail. And I think it's about 30-ish hours. So I think it has the potential to all work out, but I just don't think truth seekers. It's an important point to realize that there is this overlap of time, and people may try, to be mapping these things out in Excel, and to be adding up the dates. And I did this. I tried to make the math work and figure out, are we miscounting? Like, people were making these claims that, oh yeah, it is still 364 days, and it's like, man, it's just, I'm doing everything I can in Excel to see if that's true, and I'm making all these pictures, and I'm trying to look at it all these different ways, and it's just not adding up. But the problem is, when you're doing that, I don't think you're taking time zones into consideration. I wasn't. And you're not taking the international date line into consideration. And you're not taking into consideration the fact that there are always 2 Gregorian dates running simultaneously, depending on where you are on Earth. And that's the way the creation was set up to work, I think. You have to look at it from the Creator's perspective, from his vantage point, and the amount of time that has to pass from his vantage point for everyone to experience their time. And the Sabbath day is a good way to see that, and we can't see that. There's like a hidden day, because we're inside of our bubble and we're not seeing things from his eyes, from his perspective. So that's just food for thought on that. I will be coming out with another video about the interactive translation project. Go check that one out too. That'll help us sort out a lot of doctrinal confusion, I'm sure. It's interactive, so it's no man's private interpretation. It's trying to unveil the original languages. It's funny how there was this darkness for a long time, and then the translators finally came and brought it into English, but now there's an effort to try and bring it back to the original language. And so I recommend you check out the Interactive Translation Project. Get involved. It's meant to be interactive, not a private interpretation. truth-seeking, iron sharpening iron, trying to find accuracy, consistency, transparency, and accountability. But in addition, what I was going to say was I'm getting ready to come out with a video on the international date line and the Creator's international date line and how that works as compared to the man-made international date line. So I guess that's it for now. Shalom, and may Abba bless as you continually seek out His truth in love with a pure heart.